Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 22nd of March, 2024. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So apologies for not doing an episode yesterday. Like I said I was going to do, I ended up skipping it because I was just too tired, and as you can see from the amount of tabs I have open in front of me, this episode requires my full bullish energy and attention because there is a lot to get through. I'm gonna guess this episode's gonna go for about an hour or something like that, even longer, who cares? I'm gonna go until I'm out of things to talk about. But first off, I had a really fun time in Sydney over the last couple of days attending that event that I told you guys about. Had a couple of dinners that I attended and actually spoke on stage at the one on Wednesday night, basically like an open AMA. Talked about Ethereum, talked about the markets a little bit. Basically a Daily Gwei Refuel episode there. So I had a lot of fun, as you can see in my picture here. Hung out with a bunch of friends. Actually met up with a few friends between events as well. That was really great. So yeah, I'm pumped. I'm charged. I'm ready to get into everything. And there was a lot to get through. So without further ado, let's jump into the first thing, which of course was the SEC once again waging war against ETH and Ethereum. Now, as we all know, Gary Gensler is no fan of crypto. In particular, he's no fan of basically everything, even except Bitcoin. Traditionally, he's been very hostile to everything except Bitcoin, particularly ETH, but he did stop calling ETH directly a security a while ago and stop kind of hinting at that he thought ETH was a security. But over the last couple of days, I think mostly yesterday, news came out, and this news is based on a lot of kind of different sources and scoops. It's not really something that we have kind of concrete evidence for, but the news came out that the SEC is probing various different companies, including the Ethereum Foundation, for information about ETH with regards to its status as a security. Now, of course, as we know, this is one of the dumbest things that the SEC could be doing, because not only would they lose any case that they brought against, I don't know who they bring this case against, but like not only would they lose those cases, there's just like no chance in hell they would be able to get ETH classified as a security, and the statute of limitations is actually passed on the ETH ICO, so they wouldn't even be able to classify that as an investment contract, aka a security. So it would basically be impossible. But as we all know, or can all assume, they're probably doing this because they want to deny the ETH ETFs on May 23rd, and they want to find any reason they can to do this. Now, there's been a lot of speculation around them denying it based on that futures spot correlation that I've discussed before, and about how that isn't actually a basis for denial. And I guess like them going this path of trying to basically deny based on ETH being a security is even worse than denying it based on correlation. Would open up an even worse can of worms. So Gensler seems to be picking the scorched earth approach that I spoke about over the last couple of weeks about how they would deny the ETH ETFs. Now, in saying all of that, I do want to emphasize here that we don't have much information to go on. It is just various kind of news sources reporting on this. It is not coming from the SEC directly. There has been no official kind of word from the SEC on this. There's been no lawsuits or anything from the SEC. So right now we're working on limited information. So I just wanted to stress that there. But for a kind of overview of this, Paul Grewal, the chief legal officer at Coinbase, did a great thread about this, where he started off by saying, again, with the ETH misinformation as we await a decision on ETH ETPs or ETFs. Okay, let's talk about some basic facts about Ethereum. Millions of Americans hold ETH. It has been vital to crypto since its 2015 launch, and ETH is a commodity, not a security. And then in his following tweets, he basically has a lot of supporting evidence to back up this claim here. We all know this is true. I mean, ETH has been trading as a commodity on the CME Futures Exchange for a long time now. It has been treated as a commodity by the CFTC, which is the other major financial regulator in the US, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, basically like the yin to the SEC's yang here. But if the SEC wants to go after ETH and classify it as a security, they're going to have like a really uphill battle to do this. Now, I'm speculating that they're not actually trying to classify ETH as a security. What they're trying to do is just find a reason to deny the ETH ETFs on May 23rd. But again, like this just seems really dumb to me, because they would have less of a hard time denying based on the future spot correlation than they would going down this path. Like, I just feel like this is even more scorched earth, and this is literally Gensler like lighting himself on fire. It just makes zero sense from a logical and kind of factual perspective. But as we know, and as I've discussed before, Gensler doesn't want to be logical and factual. He's just doing his own thing. Now, in saying that, people have asked me, do you still think the ETFs are going to get approved by May 23rd? I understand like all of the bear cases here. I understand why people are saying that the odds are low. I understand that the Bloomberg guys are saying it's like 25% odds or something like that by May 23rd. I completely understand all that. But in saying that, maybe I'm crazy, but I still think that the ETFs are going to get approved on May 23rd. And I will only change my mind on this once we get to maybe like mid-April and we haven't seen back and forth between the SEC and the issuers. And the reason I say that is because getting these things kind of over the line requires back and forth. It doesn't require as much as it did with the BTC ETFs, but it does require some communication here. So until I see that back and forth not happen by mid-April, I'm still going with the fact that I believe they're going to get approved by May 23rd here. I know it sounds crazy for me to say that given all of the evidence to the contrary, and I totally understand all of that evidence, and I'm not trying to be delusional here and say and be hopium about it. You know, I was basically a very kind of like a very strong supporter or a very strong believer in the BTC ETFs getting approved based on the facts and circumstances back then, and I was consistent with that position based on information. So this isn't just about me, you know, obviously being, I don't know, you can call me an ETH maxi or whatever, and because it's ETH, I think it's going to happen. It would be the same for any other asset. I'm just looking at the facts and circumstances here, and all the facts and circumstances lead to them having to approve the ETH ETFs on May 23rd. But then, obviously, we have the wrench that gets thrown into that, which is all of the stuff that Gary Gensler is doing around basically the scorched earth approach here. So as I said, we've still got like a few weeks until mid-April, but that's when I'll probably give up all hope on a May 23rd approval, and I'll gladly own the fact that I was wrong on this. Like, that's the thing. You guys know that I'm one who sticks to facts and circumstances, and that's the reason why I think like this. But at the end of the day, like, you can stick to facts and circumstances as much as you want, but someone can still punch you in the face for no reason. And that's exactly what Gensler is trying to do here, I believe. But that whole discussion about if ETH is a security or not is completely irrelevant to this. This is really just an SEC fishing expedition to try and deny these ETFs based on that basis. It's going to go nowhere. There is absolutely zero chance that ETH is ever classified as a security. Like, literally zero, guys. It's not going to happen. And of course, I think the market knows this, and that's why ETH obviously went down on this news, because there's some bots trading it. But that went straight back up, and ETH, like, there was already a kind of a general market sell-off, but ETH has been relatively strong in the face of that. And it's because the market knows that this is literally a fishing expedition. The market knows that the ETFs are going to get approved eventually anyway. Like, even if they're denied on May 23rd, they're going to get approved at some point anyway. They're like, it's not a denial on May 23rd. It's in effect a delay, really. Like, and maybe it doesn't happen until next year because we have to restart the process again. But really, it's going to happen. And I know that some people want it to happen later, actually, so that there's more infrastructure put in place to support the ETH ETFs, which will result in more inflows. I personally would just love it to happen on May 23rd so we can get rid of this circus. I hate this circus, guys. Like, I absolutely hate this. I hated it for BTC. I hated having to cover it. I hated having to kind of learn about all this shit that's just so boring, like the SEC processes, the processes around ETFs. Like, to me, I mean, I learn about it because it's, I guess, like, it is entertaining to an extent, and I do want to cover it for you guys. But really, when you boil down to it, it's just quite boring. It's quite and it's quite frustrating having to see the kind of like process of getting an ETF approved turn so political just because it's crypto. So yeah, that's I think like most of what I wanted to say about that. As I said, Paul Grell's tweet thread here is probably the much better thing to go read and pay attention to, because he just breaks it down in a really nice fashion. There was a lot of takes from different people on this, but again, unless we see more information from the SEC directly on this, I would say that a lot of it is rumors and speculation right now. So please, kind of like whatever you read, just take it with a grain of salt, because there's no kind of concrete evidence right now of what the SEC is doing, and may just go nowhere. It may just be the SEC, literally, as I said, doing this fishing expedition where they're casting a wide net, trying to catch as much fish as possible, but in reality, like, it's probably just going to fizzle out into nothing. So until we get more information on that, that's my current stance on it. And as I said, I still believe the ETFs can get approved by May 23rd, but I will change my stance on that over the next few weeks if we don't see back and forth, just purely based on the fact that there just won't be enough time from mid-April to May 23rd, at least from my understanding, for them to work through all of the intricacies to get these things approved here. And also, before I finish up here, there's one other thing. So I believe BlackRock and maybe one other issuer added staking to their ETFs recently. Now, people were speculating on why they did this. I give it like basically a 0% chance that these ETFs are going to be staked ETFs out of the gate. There's just no way that's going to happen. I mean, like, the chances are low enough, I guess, if you take the bear case for a spot ETF, let alone a staked spot ETF. But the reason why the issuers are doing this is that I believe they're trying to force the SEC to communicate with them and basically say to them, hey, you need to remove this staking portion of it and then we'll approve it, right? It's like kind of a negotiation tactic here. The same way that the issuers were fighting the SEC on an in-kind versus cash generation for these ETFs, and then the SEC basically said to them, no, you have to remove this part and we'll approve it, the other part. I can't remember which one they ended up approving in kind or cash. I've forgotten that at this point, but that's what I think that they're doing here. So yeah, just there's a 0% chance it's going to be staked out of the gate, but eventually it's going to be a staked ETF, and that's when it gets really interesting, obviously, because it offers a yield, and we all know the boomers love their yield, so that's when it gets really, really interesting. But yeah, that's another thing that came out over the last few days as well that I hadn't covered yet, but yeah, just keep in mind that is, I guess, like what the issuers are doing. They're trying to get the SEC to engage and negotiate here in order to get this thing over the line there. All right, in much more bullish news for Ethereum, BlackRock has launched a yield-bearing stablecoin on Ethereum. Like, that's massive, guys. Like, I can't even overstate how big of a deal that is. BlackRock, let me read that again. BlackRock has launched a yield-bearing stablecoin on Ethereum, and not just a small potatoes yield-bearing stablecoin. They launched a $100 million worth of this stablecoin on Ethereum. It's on Ethereum Mainnet. It's not on an L2. It's not on some private testnet. It's on Ethereum L1 Mainnet, and they paid I think just under $5 to do this. And even if they paid $100 or $1,000 to do this, do you think they would care that they had to pay that fee in the face of what they're doing here, in the face of their size? Their size is size. It's BlackRock, for God's sake, right? And they've done this in partnership with Coinbase Institutional and Securitize here, which is Rob Leshner's company, I believe. And Rob Leshner was the founder and CEO of I believe that's his company. If I'm wrong there, someone correct me. But guys, like, this is literally the vision of what Ethereum is trying to be playing out. I've said for a long time now that Ethereum L1 is going to be forever the most robust, decentralized, censorship-resistant, secure, credibly neutral settlement layout for the world. And the way we scale this to the world is twofold. L1, it was still going to be scaled over time, but it's always naturally going to be much more expensive than the L2s. So L1 will be relegated to basically being a settlement layer for L2s and being a settlement layer for the people who can afford these fees, in particular large institutions. So we basically keep L1 as this secure settlement layer for the institutions to use directly, and then we have layer 2s and higher, like layer 3s and so on and so forth, that scale to the world. And I'm going to talk a lot about L2s later in the episode, but that is really the Ethereum kind of grand vision, the Ethereum settlement layer thesis playing out here. And that is really a absolutely massive deal because we're proving out this thesis. Like, for a long time, people were debating whether these large institutions like BlackRock would actually use Ethereum mainnet, or they would just use their own private kind of like L2 or their own private Ethereum kind of fork or something like that. And they have traditionally done this, don't get me wrong. JP Morgan is famous for doing this. They actually built, they forked Geth, I believe, and built their own version. It was kind of an internal thing here. But I believe the reason why BlackRock and other big institutions are going to use the Ethereum L1 is because the infrastructure already exists, and they can have relative certainty that it is truly decentralized, that it is censorship resistant, that it is credibly neutral, that it is secure and reliable, because Ethereum L1 has 100% uptime. Ethereum L1 has an extremely strong client diversity ecosystem, extremely strong developer ecosystem with an extremely strong and detailed roadmap. And I think that they see this, their internal teams see this, and they think, you know, what else are we going to use? Like, none of these other L1s even come close to Ethereum. Like, not even close, guys. I don't think people realize that when it comes to the institutional needs, none of the other L1s can serve this. And the other proponents for the other L1s should be able to admit this to themselves as well, because it's just a fact. It's not something up for debate. It's just a fact that Ethereum L1 is incredibly robust. You know, for example, take away the high fees and the, I guess, like relatively slow transactions on Ethereum L1. Let's just say if Ethereum L1 had, you know, low fees and faster transactions because it had like 1 second block times or something like that, then you wouldn't hear anyone kind of saying that Ethereum L1 wasn't a great platform. It really is, because they don't understand that the high fees are there and the slow block times are there to keep Ethereum strongly decentralized, to keep Ethereum censorship-resistant properties alive, to keep Ethereum's reliability alive, and to keep Ethereum up as 100% uptime, and so on and so forth. So these large institutions understand this very, very deeply. So that's why BlackRock has launched on the L1, on the public L1 here. And it seems like, from some other kind of tweets that I saw, based on the functions of the contract that BlackRock launched, they're going to be able to do a mint redeem with USDC of their own stablecoin. So their stablecoin is called Build. It's actually called Build, which is pretty cool. And then there's USDC, obviously, from Circle. And Circle is heavily involved with Coinbase, which obviously is heavily involved with BlackRock because they're custodying BlackRock's ETFs, like the BTC one and in the future the ETH one. So you have this relationship between all these big groups where BlackRock can do their institutional grade stablecoin and then offer a bridge between that and USDC and do like a mint burn of it, where everything is still kind of above board, everything is still regulated like it is, I guess, like on the USDC side. So that is massive, because that means that everyday retail investors can get exposure to this, can use this thing. So I don't know what else to say, guys. Like, this is some of the biggest news that's ever happened in crypto, not just within Ethereum, but within crypto generally. It's bullish ETH, it's bullish Ethereum, and it's bullish the Ethereum thesis and the grand design that I've talked about before there. So yeah, anyway, you can go check out more about this if you would like. I will link this in the YouTube description below. But yeah, I mean, that is, I guess, like a counter bullish to the bearishness, or I guess like perceived bearishness of the SEC going after Ethereum there. These institutions are basically saying, screw the SEC, we're going full steam ahead with Ethereum, with ETH, we believe in Ethereum and we want to use it. That's just incredibly bullish to me. All right, another big bullish piece of news that came out just today actually is that MaxEB, or EIP-7251, is going into Pectra. Oh, I can't even describe how happy this makes me, because I have been a champion for this EIP from literally day one. I have been trying to get this EIP to be considered for inclusion and to be a priority for Pectra for a long time now, and we finally got confirmation today that the core devs are happy with including this in Pectra. So of course, I put out a tweet about why MaxEB is awesome. So as you guys know already, MaxEB allows each validator to have a maximum of 2,048 ETH staked instead of 32 ETH, which is the current maximum. And this allows us to consolidate down the number of validators on the network while still keeping the same level of security. This is because we can go down from 1 million validators to like 100,000 validators, the same amount of ETH is staked, the same amount of node operators are on the network, which means we have the same level of security as we do at 1 million validators. So by combining and also by consolidating down the number of validators, we take a huge load off the network, particularly on the peer-to-peer layer, which is obviously even got even more load on it post the Dencun upgrade because of blobs. This is absolutely massive. And now by taking this load off the network, we can then do things like increase the blob size and the blob count in a safe manner, which equals more scalability for L2s. Just again, like Ethereum's scalability blob era engine is starting to chug really, really fast now. And then MaxEB also allows for constant compounding of stake for solo validators. So if you're a solo staker, there's no need for you to acquire another 32 ETH in order to stake it, in order to earn rewards on it. If every time you get rewards now, you'll be able to basically compound that into your existing validator up to 2,048 ETH and immediately begin earning rewards on it. Huge unlock for solo stakers here, guys. MaxEB reduces the operational overhead of managing many validators, which is obviously good for staking pools. And as I said, I'm incredibly excited for MaxEB to go live for the next network upgrade, which is Pectra. I am so excited for this, guys. Like, it's finally happening. Pectra timing at this point in time, it's like up in the air. It could happen by the end of the year, but I'm more kind of leaning towards early next year. But if it does happen by November, I'd be very, very pleased with that. It's probably not going to happen in December, but November, if we can get to that, that'll be really cool. And there are other EIPs, obviously, as part of Pectra. The other major ones are PeerDAS and inclusion lists. I think PeerDAS is probably going to get pushed out at this point to Osaka, which is the upgrade after Pectra. But inclusion lists looks like it can still be included in Pectra. So I'm looking forward to seeing if they agree to include that as well. But yeah, good day to see that 7251 has been included here, and I can't wait. I mean, I can't wait to consolidate my validators. I have so many rewards that I have to wait to build up to 32 ETH before I can restake them, or I guess like put them on a new validator. I just can't wait to be able to just auto compound my stake and not have to worry about doing it anymore. And it actually has tax implications as well, because if you are compounding autonomously, which means that the ETH never hits your account or never hits your ownership, and it's just being kind of restaked within a validator, does that mean you don't have to pay tax on that ETH because it basically didn't come into your possession? That is an open question. That is not something that I can answer. I'm not a tax expert. I'm going to be asking my accountant about this because it is something new. But I think that from, I guess, like a fairness perspective, it should be that you shouldn't get taxed on that ETH that you've earned in rewards if you're auto compounding the stake, if it's not actually coming into your possession, if it's just going and being locked in your validator again. But again, like, this is something for the tax experts out there. But yeah, anyway, 7251 is coming in Pectra here, or Pectra here. I'm super excited for that. Now, related was a bit of a tweet a tweet thread that I saw between Dancrad Feist and a bunch of other core developers and researchers here, all about what the actual load is on the network with the fact that we have to do like many attestations across many different validators, and apparently according to Dancrad, nearly 40% of the node the node and the validators is traffic. So basically he says, yeah, this seems like a lot, but with some networking improvements we can double the number of blobs, which means that those networking improvements aren't only just on the client side but also on the network side, with MaxEB reducing the number of validators on the network. So guys, like, this means that we can increase the blobs even further. Like, we can go increase the size of the blobs, and then we can increase the count of the blobs, and just offer so much like scalability on the data side for the L2s that we're probably not going to have to worry about it for quite a while here by doing this. And I think this is like such a big deal that people are under indexing on here about how we can do this. And I think this is something that we should definitely be full steam ahead on, because I know that, and I'm going to talk about this a bit with the L2 discussion I'm going to have. I know that the L2 cost has now moved from data to execution side of things, but that doesn't mean that we should stop scaling the data side. The data side should stay as close to zero as we can get it, because there is still like another 1000x at least like growth ahead of us for these things. So in the short term, yeah, okay, it's going to be something that there's more capacity than there is demand for it. But in the longer term, we're expecting this demand to go up. And if it doesn't, we basically failed as an ecosystem. Like, really, I mean, if we don't grow this thing 1000x from here, then crypto has no real kind of like use case. But I have like a very, I give that very low odds. We're going to scale this thing absolutely massively, like 1000, 10,000x from here. It's going to be just way bigger than what it is today. There's going to be billions, if not trillions of transactions per day happening across these networks, guys. I know that sounds like a crazy far-fetched, but that's what's going to happen here. So you can go give this little thread a read about the kind of technical aspect of it here, but I'll link that in the YouTube description below. Now, this brings me to another point of discussion, which is something that Eric Connor and Mariano Conti launched over the last couple of days, which is an initiative called pumpthegas.org. Now, what this initiative wants to do is basically pump Ethereum's gas limit from 30 million to 40 million. Now, you can go read the website for all the details around this, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But I did kind of quote tweet this and say that I was kind of against it, but I think maybe I used the wrong word there. I'm not necessarily against this. I'm kind of indifferent to it because I don't think it actually makes a difference at this point in time. So essentially, by increasing the gas limit, this can result in a 15 to 33% reduction in L1 transaction fees. Now, I'm going to discuss this in much more detail with Eric. We're going to do another drive-through episode soon, and we're going to discuss this in a lot of detail. Like, we're going to go over like every part of it here. But I just wanted to quickly mention it today because obviously it's important. But my stance on this can basically be summarized as, I don't think we should be promising this as something that can fix L1 transaction fees, because it cannot. Even a 15 to 33% reduction does nothing for the end user in my mind. So let me put some numbers to this. Let's say that you currently are doing a transaction on L1 and it's costing you $10. Okay, that's obviously very expensive. So let's do the gas limit increase, and now it reduces it by 33%, and now that transaction costs whatever it is, $7, something like that. Is that really going to make a difference for the end user, like material difference? Because to put in context here, we just reduced L2 fees from like $1 to less than a cent. That is an absolutely massive material difference compared to something like this. Now, I understand that that may not be a strong argument for people, but what I am kind of concerned about is making sure that we don't promise to people that by pumping the gas limit, we can actually reduce L1 transaction fees in a material way in order to materially affect users. And on top of this, by reducing it, what's going to happen is that most of the space is just going to get immediately eaten up by MEV bots. Like, that is the problem that we have with when we do these things. And if we're doing it on L1, there's a bunch of other consequences as well, like increased load on nodes and so on and so forth. So I think that while the initiative itself is obviously rooted in the desire to do something for end users, I think that it doesn't really have that much of an impact, and that's why I'm kind of indifferent to it. Like, if the community wants it, like, I'll want it as well. Like, well, let's go to 40 million, right? I have no issue with that. But what I have issue with is that I don't want us promising the community that this is going to have a material impact on their L1 transactions, because Ethereum has a roll-up centric roadmap. We shouldn't really be caring that much about L1 being, at least in the short to medium term, scalable for end users, because that's just not how Ethereum is being designed to be. And of course, like, as I've discussed before, the whole Verge roadmap and the statelessness part of it is trying to basically make it so that we can increase the gas limit in a safe way, but not increase it from 30 million to 40 million, but increase it from 30 million to 300 million, right? Or to 3,000 million here, right? So when you think about it like that, 3 billion, 3,000 million. But when you think about it like that, that is the kind of order of magnitude increase that we can do safely once we have these other upgrades in. So as I said, I'm not against this. I'm indifferent to it. And if the community wants it, I'll set it up on my nodes as well. I'll change it from 30 million to 40 million on my validators and go with the flow here. But there is much more information on the pumpthegas.org website. And as I said, Eric and I are going to walk through this step by step on next drive through in great detail. So I'm not going to spoil it on the refuel today. And there's so much more to get through. I'm already at 25 minutes and there's so much more to get through. So I'm going to leave that one at that for today. All right, so Coinbase has announced that they are now running 50% of their validators on Nethermind. So as you guys know, Coinbase has been running 100% Geth for quite a while now, but recently they said that they would switch to 50% Nethermind and 50% Geth, and in the longer run, they're going to be 33% on Nethermind, 33% on Geth, and 33% on Aragon, I believe, or Besu. I actually can't remember exactly which one the other. Oh yeah, Aragon. So they're going to be 33, 33, 33. But right now they're 50% Nethermind, 50% Geth. Guys, I think that we're actually below the supermajority threshold now. I think we're below 66% Geth on the network, given that Coinbase is such a large share of the network now, as well as all the other efforts made by other players in the ecosystem to reduce their Geth reliability here. And if you go to clientdiversity.org, this also supports what I'm saying, where they're now listing it at 66%. Now, obviously, this is not something that's totally accurate, but I think that we are finally below that 66% threshold. So a huge, huge kudos to Coinbase for doing this and doing this relatively quickly. Honestly, I think that it may have felt like a while, but they've done this relatively quickly for the fact that they're such a big kind of operator here, and the fact that they're running 50% Nethermind and Geth is already awesome, but the fact that they're going to be 33, 33, 33 is even better, because that's the ideal kind of ratio for client diversity across the kind of ecosystem. And if you're running kind of 3 clients there, obviously it's an equal share between them there. Now, and then hopefully in the far future, I guess, or maybe not the far future, but hopefully sometime in the future, they add other clients that like Besu and Reth, when those clients become more stable and reliable for Coinbase to be able to run them there. So just awesome to see this, guys. I'm super pumped for it. But yeah, you can go check out this tweet for yourself. There's a bunch of replies in there just sharing the good vibes that happened here. All right, so the rated.network kind of website has a new page all about restaking. So it's a native restaking page where you can see the total amount of ETH that has been natively restaked, the network percentage that has been restaked, the total eigenpods and total validators restaked here, as well as all the operators that are that has a percentage of their fleet that is currently restaking. So I actually wanted to use this as a springboard for a deeper discussion around node operators. So as I've discussed with you guys before, we shouldn't really be looking at pools for a network percentage kind of penetration here. We should be looking at node operators, because multiple pools can have the same node operator. So for example, if you go to the node operators here, all nodes, or P2P is probably a better example. As far as I know, like a lot of these bigger node operators, they operate across multiple different pools. Like they'll be part of Lido, they'll be operating nodes on Rocket Pool, they'll be operating nodes for like EtherFi. So when you look at it from that perspective, that's still the same node operator. So again, as I've discussed before, node operator share is the most important thing on the network, not pool share. Because when it comes to node operators, they can be part of multiple pools here, which means they can exert multiple percentages of influence on the network. Because if you look at Lido, you'll see that headline number, 30.9%. But then you go into the entities, and this is the node operators. And no node operator has over 1% share here of the network. And then, but then when you look at the node operators, you can look at this and be like, okay, well, here is P2P at 0.9% with Lido. But then if you go to the pools tab, you can see that But P2P, sorry, not the pools tab, the node operators tab here, you can see that P2P.org actually has 2.5% of the network, because they are not just part of Lido, they are part of multiple different pools. So the node operator percentage is much more important than the pool percentage in my eyes. But you can also take the argument that Lido is obviously not just the independent node operators, it's also the fact that Lido sits above it as a governance entity, which is correct as well. Same with something like Coinbase. So I think that there is a lot of nuance to discuss here, but still, I think that node operators are the most critical part of it. Like, how many individual node operators does Ethereum have? And of course, Rated.network is not going to be able to list all of them, but if we just list the known ones, we have a lot of node operators on the network, guys. Like, you can see here, and none of them have over 5% market share, by the way. Most of them have actually less than 1%. But you can see here there are a bunch of them. I don't know the exact number of how many node operators there they're counting here, but there are a lot. I think there's over 100 at least here. And these are known node operators. These are not all of the individual other ones that we have, like solo validators and rocket pool node operators, right? There are potentially thousands of those. So we have thousands of node operators on the network, thousands of individual kind of like full nodes on the network with validators attached to them. And that is still the most important part of Ethereum. And that is what we should be looking at there. So that's my kind of take on that. But you can go check out the native restaking page for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, Tony is out today or yesterday or the day before. It's kind of all blurring together here with a new website called calldata.pics. This website provides live data on call data and blob usage. Furthermore, it comes with visualizations on rollup data, block sizes, blob inclusion, and more. This is still V1, and Tony plans to add more graphs in the near future. So you can see here what it looks like in real time. It's pretty basic right now. It's a V1. It's kind of like a little bit clunky, but it has all the relevant data that you need. But he also posted out a tweet that was related to this, that he basically got the data from his own dashboard here, which is daily call data usage per entity. So as you guys know, before blobs went live, the heaviest users of call data were the L2s. And as you can see from this chart, basically only one L2 or one known L2 right now is using call data in any meaningful capacity, and that's Scroll. But Scroll is obviously going to go to blobs after this. So basically all of the other L2s have moved to blobs, which means they're not using call data anymore, which means that call data usage is down a lot. And there are other transactions that use call data. As you can see, they've creeped up a little bit, but it's come down substantially. I think there's been like on average, maybe 50% drop here in call data usage because of the fact that blobs have gone from call data. It's more. I think it's like 60% or even more than that because of the fact that L2s have gone to blobs instead of call data. So just a really nice way of visualizing the, I guess, like upgrade going very smoothly here, and the fact that the L2s immediately went to blobs, because why wouldn't you? Like if you're not on blobs, that means that you're basically overpaying for data, essentially. So just been great to see that there, and you can go check out Tony's website for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, I think this is the last thing before I move on to some L2 stuff, or second last thing here. So on February 6th, Tony and Parathosh sent the transaction on Sepolia, which uncovered a bug that could have happened on Mainnet, and this was related to Geth. The bug was quickly fixed in the client, and now after all nodes updated to Dencun, we can finally disclose this issue. So I think that this issue was a critical bug within Geth that, if exploited on Mainnet, would have resulted in that worst case scenario that we've talked about, where if Geth still had a supermajority of the network, then it would result in the network finalizing on a bugged chain. That's my understanding here. And this again speaks to how important client diversity is, like critically important to the network. And again, the fact that we're now, I mean, from what we can measure below that supermajority threshold makes, I think, like everyone breathe a bit of a sigh of relief, or a bit of a kind of, okay, well, now that isn't really an issue. Right now, it's going to keep getting better. Geth is going to keep coming down from that 66% threshold. And we've kind of, I wouldn't say solved client diversity, but we've made it so that client diversity actually means something now. Because before Geth was down from 66%, it actually didn't really mean much. But now that they are down below that threshold, it means a lot. And as you guys know, I've discussed this at length before, client diversity is at the heart of Ethereum's kind of core protocol development here. So it's great to see that. But if you want to see what this incident actually was and read the post-mortem here, you can. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so there. All right, last thing here before I move on to the L2 discussion. So Brantley posted that you can now search for your ETH address as your ENS name on Google, and it will return your Ethereum balance as well as your hexadecimal address. Now, this is, I think, being gradually rolled out. It didn't work for me when I searched for sassel.eth on my end in Australia here. I haven't tried it with a VPN or anything. And as far as I know, Brantley lives in the US, so it may just be on the US side of things. But essentially, you can search for your own ENS name on Google, and it will display your Ethereum balance as well as your hexadecimal address here. This is just huge, guys. Like, you could already search for your Ethereum address, and it would resolve and basically show you your Ethereum balance here, or your ETH balance here. But it's great to see Google continuing to iterate on that and basically enable ENS integration now. And I hope that they even go further than this and basically show not only your ETH balance, but your token balance and your NFT balance. And then even further than that, they could potentially show your balance across different chains. But I guess like they link to Etherscan here. as the top link, so you can just click that and find all that information anyway. But yeah, I mean, just another little piece of adoption here that's happening for Ethereum because of ENS, and ENS is so awesome. You guys know I love ENS so much, and I basically go by my ENS name, right? Sassel.eth. Sassel was my nickname from when I was like 12 years old. But yeah, I mean, if this is rolled out for you, you should be able to just Google your ENS name or anyone's ENS name and see their ETH balance on Google there. All right, so it's been about a week, or more than a week now, actually. I've lost track of time here. It's been like 9 days since Dencun went live, since blobs went live, and L2s have gone crazy. You can see here from the Growthepie website, the layer 2 user base is at an all-time high right now, as well as activity. So if I go to L2 Beat, I don't think I've got this up right now, so I'll just go to the L2 Beat website to show you. So yeah, Growthepie shows that layer 2 user base activity is at all-time high, and then if you go to the L2 Beat activity page, you can see here that the scaling factor is at all-time high as well, with massive growth across pretty much all of the L2s. You can see here that base has base Arbitrum One, Linnea, OP Mainnet, so on and so forth, have grown hugely over the last past day and 7 days and 30 days, really, since Dencun went live here. So just absolutely massive growth across the ecosystem, because obviously we made it cheaper for you to be able to use these L2s. And as you guys know, there is that great website that was made by Coffee called gasfees.io, which I'll bring up here for you guys, and you can see what the costs look like across the network. Now, in saying this, there has been a uptick in costs on Base in particular, because there's been a lot of people using Base. Now, I want to explain why this is. There's a nice little tweet here from Michael Silberling, who shows that Base saw a rush of activity from transactions that were seemingly not fee sensitive. So when L2 congestion pricing kicked in, activity didn't start to decline until gas fees hit for Gwei. This is the same as it works on L1, guys. Once capacity is reached on the L2 side, on the execution side, the fees will start to go up again because of the fact that there is a priority fee mechanism, just like there is on L1 Ethereum. So now the bottleneck is no longer the data pricing, because we have blobs now instead of call data. The bottleneck is now on the execution side of things. And what this means is that you can see here, Jesse Polak basically shared a tweet thread talking about how they're going to be scaling Base's EVM to 100 times where it is now, or 1,000 times where it is now. And the way they do this is very similar to how it's done on ETH L1, but in a much more, I guess, like a much quicker fashion. So essentially they raise their gas limit. That's like the first easy thing to do. You raise the gas limit of your L2, of your EVM L2, much more than what it is. And right now, Base's gas limit is actually very conservative. They can, from what I see, raise it 5 to 10x from where it is now and be safe doing so. But they want to raise it a lot higher than that. But it's not just the gas limit. It's also optimizing the EVM across basically everything. And there are multiple projects doing this. Obviously, Monad is an L1 that's doing this. There's the Mega ETH L2 that's also doing this. Arbitrum is doing this with their stylus things. And the OP ecosystem is also doing this. So everyone's kind of working on increasing the execution side of things here in order to scale that out. Because while data is not the bottleneck, there is always going to be a bottleneck on the execution side or the data side. And right now we're at the execution side. So what's going to end up happening is that we're going to have basically a balancing effect happening over the next couple of years at least, where essentially we're going to have data that's cheap, and then the data is going to get expensive, and then it shifts to like data being more expensive. So we introduce more data by increasing the size, more data capacity by increasing the size and count of blobs, and also I guess like the L2s can increase their efficient use of data by compressing more and so on and so forth. But then when data is cheap and execution is not, the execution side needs to be scaled again. So we increase gas limit, we do optimizations to the EVM, and we kind of like can do even higher scaling on L3s and such. And that will bring fees down again. So currently the bottleneck for Base at least is on the execution side of things, because blobs are still underutilized. I don't even think we're using the target of 3 blobs yet. I think we're using like 1 or 2 blobs per block there. So when you look at it from that perspective, you can see, or per slot I should say, you can see that essentially we've scaled Ethereum so much that there is just more capacity on the data side now than there is to fill it. But there is a lot of demand now on the execution side, which makes fees go up. So that's why you've seen fees go up. And I think I warned about this and talked about this, that fees wouldn't be as low as they were because there's going to be a lot of demand coming in now. All the demand that wasn't there when fees were $1, and now that fees are a cent or sub a cent, they're in now, right? And then I'm not even talking about MEV with regards to this, because MEV isn't really happening in a real way on the L2s just yet, but it will. And that again is going to be a driver of fees going up here. So we're in the great scalability era of Ethereum now that we have blobs, but the fact that we have blobs now means that the L2s don't have to worry so much about data and they worry about the execution side. Now, what's really cool about this is that we now get to basically see what the other execution environments look like and how much improvements they can make, because there's not just the EVM, there is the SVM with Eclipse, there is zk-wasm with Fluent, there is Move with Movement, there is Starknet's own VM that they've had live for a while, right? And there are a bunch of other projects working on VMs that aren't the EVM. And as you guys know, I think right now, at least, because the SVM has been around for a while, it is the best execution environment right now, and the most scalable. It doesn't work very well as a monolith, as we've seen, you know, and that's what I've always been bearish on, is that the monolithic blockchains. But as a pure execution environment, as an L2, with Eclipse going live soon, we're going to see just how well it works and just how much we can push the load on it. Like right now, I think that Solana L1 does around, on average, maybe like 800 to 1,000 TPS last time I checked. And TPS is an imperfect measure, but if we're using that as the benchmark here, can Eclipse do more than that? Eclipse is not going to be using blobs, by the way. It's going to be using off-chain DA. So it's not really a one-to-one comparison. You can't really compare the rollups to the L2s or to the Validiums, because it's not really a fair comparison here, but it's going to be interesting to see just like how much execution execution scaling can be done on these L2s that aren't EVMs, and then also seeing what can be done on the EVM side as well here. But you can go read Jesse Pollack's tweet thread about this. It has more information, as well as Roberto Bayardo's blog post, which also has more information, or Warpcast, I should say, cast. I'll link that in the YouTube description below for you to do so there. Right, so Optimism has announced that the first fully permissionless fraud proofs are now live on OP Sepolia. This is a huge deal, guys. You guys know that fault proofs or fraud proofs have been coming for a long time for the OP stack. They've been, a long time coming, and it's kind of been a while, and people are asking, when fault proofs? Because right now, all the OP stack chains are very, very centralized because of this. And the fact that we've now finally got this live on the OP Sepolia, which is the OP testnet, is huge news. And what's even bigger news is that these are going to be permissionless fraud proofs. So as you guys know, right now, Arbitrum One has fraud proofs, but it is permissioned. You have to be on a whitelist in order to submit them. OP is basically going for the jugular here and saying, we're not going to do permissioned, we're going to do permissionless right out of the gate, which means that anyone, anywhere in the world can submit fault proofs or fraud proofs and be part of that mechanism there, which is obviously what Arbitrum is working towards. But I think that OP are actually going to get there before Arbitrum does, which is funny. But this is where the competition kicks in and where competition is really good for the end user here. So yeah, this is live on testnet right now. Not sure when it's going to be live on mainnet, but once it is, it means that automatically OP Mainnet, Base, Zora, all the OP stack mode, all the OP stack chains are going to be able to take advantage of this and be much more secure than they are today. So big news here, guys. Like, I know I've said before that I thought that Optimism may end up just skipping over fault proofs and going to ZK proofs. That can still happen at some point in the future because of the fact that OP stack is an open stack here. It could just get to a point where they basically say, okay, well, it makes a lot more sense for us to do ZK proofs instead of fraud proofs now, so let's just change to that. And maybe some OP stack chains will do that first, and then others will join. As far as I know, for the OP stack, to be part of the superchain, you basically have to be on the shared proving layer. So for the ZK proofs, so that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out there. But anyway, this is coming much sooner, I think, than anyone thought, because it had just taken so long for it to come here. So yeah, I can't wait to see this live on mainnet, because it's going to be a big deal for all of the OP stack chains, particularly Base, which is obviously just running away right now with usage. So I can't wait to see that go live there. All right, so speaking of L2 scaling on both kind of, I guess, like the execution and data front, Stephen Goldfeder had a good tweet with regards to this, where he said, L2 scaling requires innovation at both L1 and L2. Blobs was a huge step forward on the L1 front, but Arbitrum Stylus will do the same on the L2 front, reducing the cost of compute or execution by 10x. Arbitrum Stylus will be available on all Orbit chains. Study Arbitrum, study Stylus here. And then someone asked, when Stylus mainnet, and Stephen said that we are relatively close to a mainnet ready release. And obviously it needs to be decided by the DAO if they want to use it on Arbitrum One and Arbitrum Nova here. This is huge, guys. I think that I've talked about Stylus a lot before and about how Stylus is enabling Arbitrum One to do not just EVM stuff, but also compile down things like WASM to the EVM. And that's going to result in huge cost savings on the execution side of things, which is what I was talking about before, how we have this balancing act between data and execution now, and compute and scaling, and on those different axes. So that's really great to see. So just wanted to highlight that tweet there from Stephen, since he's speaking on behalf of Arbitrum here. All right, so as I mentioned before, Fluent, ZK WASM L2, which I'm an advisor to, just a disclosure here, is coming, and they've introduced their road to mainnet for Fluent. So you can see here that they're starting with a private testnet, then they're going to a public testnet, and then mainnet. There are no dates here on this, but this is basically the high-level roadmap of how they get to mainnet. And mainnet is obviously the last step in this roadmap here. And then once they're on mainnet, they're going to have a separate mainnet roadmap. Not sure on timelines here, but they have different phases of when they're doing all of this, and they detail this in their tweet thread. I think that they're going to aim to get mainnet out hopefully this year, I think. But yeah, this will be, I believe, one of the first ZK WASM main L2s, if not the first, to go live on mainnet. I did mention before that Arbitrum is going to be doing some WASM stuff with Stylus, but that's, I think, distinctly different because Arbitrum One is an optimistic rollup, a ZK WASM is a ZK rollup here. And also, it's kind of like different architecture where this is a fully ZK WASM. It's not just compiling down WASM. WASM is WebAssembly, by the way, guys. So it's just compiling that down to the EVM here. I mean, both approaches are sound. Both approaches are going to lead to more scalability, but I'm excited to see Fluent go live here to see what apps are built on it and kind of see what the cost savings are like in building in a non-EVM environment here. All right, so Growthepie's native EIP-4844 gas tracker is now live. So you can see the median transaction costs, the average transaction costs, and native transfer costs across all of the L2s updated every 10 minutes, I should say. So I'll link this in the YouTube description below, but I really like this. I'm going to look at the last 7 days, and you can see what the cost is like over the last kind of 7 days. On every kind of every hour intervals on the graph here for the different L2s. So you can kind of select which L2s you want to track and which ones you don't. If I remove scroll because they're not using blobs right now, and Polygon ZK EVM and Linnea, I don't think are using blobs. If I just keep the ones that are using blobs, you can see that Base has had some spikes in fees, and that's due to the compute side of things that I've been talking about. But really, most of the other ones have been relatively flat as well. So you can see here, it's basically tracking Zora, Arbitrum One, Starknet, OP Mainnet, and Base. Base is still quite expensive compared to the others because of the fact that they've just had a rush of activity, because you've seen on Twitter everyone kind of shilling some Base meme coins and so on and so forth. But as I said, like, we're going to be able to scale this out even further on the compute side of things, so that should just go back to being flat once we do that there. But anyway, you can go check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so speaking of gas savings and blobs, Arbitrum basically enabled blobs the other day, but there were 2 phases to reducing fees on the Arbitrum One network here, and they actually did put out phase 2 on March 19th here, which means that Arbitrum joins the low fee party, as you can see on gasfees.io, where a Uniswap trade currently costs 1 cent on Arbitrum One, and a transfer of USDC costs half a cent, and a transfer of ETH cost 1/3 of a cent. So they joined the party with blobs and with their own optimizations here, which was absolutely great to see. But you can read the little tweet thread they have here for more information about that. But yeah, if you are an Arbitrum One user, I'm sure you've already felt the lower fees on the network there. All right, so something I came across on Twitter that I'm not going to say I know much about, and I'm going to say I'm a little bit skeptical about, because it's just a project that I've seen come up recently. But there's a project, the project name is Light, and this is what they're kind of calling a new approach to tackle EVM UX fragmentation. Light enables users to seamlessly interact with any EVM chain, including L2s and L3s, as if you're on a single network. The goal is to make using Ethereum a smooth experience everywhere. Now, you can see that they've got a demo here of what this kind of looks like. Light enables you to instantly interact across chains seamlessly and pay gas in any asset you hold across chains. And here's a quick demo of how it works: sending USDC on Arbitrum and Optimism while paying gas with USDT on Polygon, all in one transaction. That is pretty amazing, guys, and speaks to what I've been talking about for years now about how this, I guess, like fragmentation is just going to be abstracted away completely at the user interface level. And it seems like that's what Light is doing here. So if this actually materializes as their demo shows, this is a massive unlock and basically solves most of the pain points around fragmentation already without, you know, the use of shared sequences, without the use of based sequencing and all that sorts of stuff there. This is basically a way to do all of the kind of cross-chain asset management on the UX side of things with and on the user interface side of things without having to kind of like I guess like do all that other stuff that I spoke about. So you can go read this Twitter thread for yourself to get I guess like a grasp on what this is. But as I said, I'm still a bit skeptical of this because whenever I see something come out that just like has such a like I hadn't heard of this project before, and whenever I see stuff like this come out and see kind of what's going on here and see how like it solves a lot of issues at once, I get a bit skeptical because of that. Like I don't know, I've just grown to be skeptical. Not saying that this isn't legit or anything like that, but I'm going to do more research into it, and I suggest you guys do your own research into this to see how this all works, especially in the back end. But if it works as the demo shows on Mainnet here, this is a huge unlock, guys. And this, as I said, basically solves all of the issues that people have been bringing up around UX fragmentation. So you should go check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right. So speaking of aggregation, NEBRA is excited to announce the NEBRA UPA, which is the first Universal Proof Aggregation protocol in production. So NEBRA UPA brings 10x plus gas cost reduction and composability for zero knowledge proof verification. Now, the disclosure here, I'm an investor in NEBRA, and the reason I invested in them was because I think proof aggregation is going to be a massive unlock for ZK proofs, because right now the main blocker for ZK proofs being as cheap as they can be is the proving costs, and the proving costs are still quite high. And I've talked about this a lot in the past about how they're going to keep coming down over time. But not only can you bring them down with optimizing your prover stack, but you can actually aggregate these proofs together, which is what I think that Polygon wants to do with their aggregation layer, and essentially, I guess, like amortize the cost across multiple kind of proofs here in order to bring that cost even further down. And once that cost gets to a point where it's like as cheap as we can possibly get it, or as close to that, then ZK proofs are going to be way cheaper than optimistic rollups, I believe. Or ZK rollups are going to be way cheaper than optimistic rollups, from what I can tell here. And the optimizations are really just getting started, guys. Like, this is not just NEBRA UPA. As I said, there are optimizations on the provers themselves, and we're going to get those costs down like so low. And this has got to do with the compute side of things. Like, so this doesn't really have much to do with the data side of things or anything really. It's more on the compute side, because the way a ZK rollup works is basically that it'll essentially do the computation and then generate a proof on that computation, and then post that proof down to mainnet along with the accompanying data, of course. But the proof cost is the thing that makes them more expensive, because with optimistic rollups, they don't do a prover. They don't have a prover that runs. Basically, they have the fraud proof mechanisms where if you detect fraud based on the data, you can submit a fraud proof, and then there's like a challenge game that happens around that. Whereas with ZK proofs or with ZK rollups, they basically prove that it's all consistent on their side, which increases computation costs, of course, and then post that proof down to mainnet. So if we can bring those computation costs down a lot for the proving, then obviously that flows down to the network, and we bring costs down for users on the user fee side of things there. But anyway, you can go check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so I think this is going to be the last thing I talk about before giving a couple of quick shout outs here. And actually, I've made it to about the 50-minute mark right now. So I've been very efficient. I'm glad that I'm not going to go over an hour, because I know that if I go over an hour, it just I start getting like, it starts getting me just rambling on about things. But anyway, there is a really great tweet here from Shriram, basically justifying why you would build an Ethereum L2. And he says here, some argue that Ethereum is a great settlement layer, and that's why L2s should settle there. And I mean, obviously, I argue that, and I talk about this all the time, but Shriram's theory, and I guess like Eigenlayer's theory, is that anyone who wants to use and transact with ETH, the asset, needs to settle on Ethereum, which is the final ledger of record of ETH. The less trust assumptions that are imposed in the settlement process, the better it is. Hence, chains that want to use ETH become L2s and settle on Ethereum. Other chains that want to interoperate trustlessly with existing Ethereum L2s now have to build as an Ethereum L2 as well. And then he expands on this in his tweet, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But this paragraph here speaks to what I've been saying for years, that as long as you have the money the money being ETH, you have everything. Because ETH is the most powerful thing about Ethereum. It is Ethereum's main economic export. It is the thing that everyone wants to tap into, not only with staking, but also using ETH as collateral, using ETH as money, using ETH as a unit of account. And how do you do this in as trustless a way as possible? You build on Ethereum as an L2, as Sriram outlines here, because you want to have those ultimate settlement guarantees. ETH on another L1 does not settle on that L1 because it is an IOU. So if you bridge ETH from Ethereum to another L1, what you have on that L1 is an IOU based on what's in the bridge, based on what's locked up in the bridge. It is not real ETH. You only have real ETH if it ultimately settles down to Ethereum L1, because that is where ETH is issued, and that is what that is where the real ETH is maintained. And that means that if you want to maintain that at when you bridge, you have to do it as an L2. You cannot do it as an L1. And this is the superpower of L2s, is the fact that we can keep everything on the ultimate settlement layer that is Ethereum. We can keep ETH and because you're using ETH, we can keep those settlement guarantees in check. Now, of course, this does apply to other assets that are issued on L1 Ethereum, but then you can have natively issued assets on the L2, and obviously other L1s have their own natively issued assets, but any assets bridged from Ethereum L1 to other L1s are not their assets, are not the native assets. You have an IOU, and the same is true for assets bridged from the L1, the other L1s to Ethereum L1. And the same is true for native assets bridged from an L2 to Ethereum L1, at least from my understanding. And there are different ways to kind of issue these assets here. But then there are also ways to do like a provable mint and burn as well. But I think that's what the AG layer, the Polygon AG layer is trying to do. But when it comes to ETH, the ultimate ledger of record for ETH is L1. It is not anything else. You cannot do it anywhere else because ETH is only issued and maintained by the Ethereum core protocol. And that is the superpower here. So that's why I've been saying for so long, guys, that ETH is the thing. If we can keep increasing ETH's value, it has an on-flow effect to the rest of the ecosystem, and it strengthens Ethereum's network effects. ETH is our main export. We should keep exporting that to L2s, to L1s, to wherever. But when we export it to L2s, they get to basically get the settlement guarantees of L1 in a properly constructed way, of course, specifically roll-ups, I guess, because I guess with Validiums, you have an extra trust assumption there of the data being off-chain instead of being on ETH L1. But that is the biggest deal, I guess, within Ethereum, is ETH, the asset. That is everything. I mean, that is the lifeblood of Ethereum. And as long as we can keep getting that value up, and that's why I'm so bullish on ETH, and kind of like shilling ETH as like the best asset to invest in crypto. Basically, I believe it is the best asset to invest in crypto. Not investment advice, but you guys know why I believe that. Yeah, that is Ethereum's superpower there. But you can read the rest of Sriram's tweet for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you guys to do so. But yeah, guys, like, I mean, I think Sriram really understands Ethereum like on a very deep level. And I couldn't think of anyone better to be heading up Eigenlayer, which is obviously an incredibly powerful primitive on Ethereum with restaking. He gets it, and he is someone that I consider to be a true Ethereum within the ecosystem. So I'm incredibly excited to have him at the helm of the restaking movement here. All right, last up, just a couple of quick shout outs. So that L2 episode that I did with Bankless finally went live. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can go do so. I'll link it in the YouTube description for you to do so. As I said last time I talked about this, it was a really great episode where we talked about the bull and bear cases of L2 tokens. I think I was more on the bearish side than others, but more so over the longer term than the shorter term here. And of course, you guys know I'm an investor in a lot of these L2s, so I was basically fighting my own bags. But you can go check out that episode. It was a really great discussion with Mike Ippolito here and Jordi Alexander, as well as the Bankless host, David and Ryan, of course. And now last up here before I finish up for today, there was another podcast I did with Show Me the Crypto. This is my third appearance on there. We talked about all things Ethereum. Basically, what Ethereum is going to look like post Dencun, what blobs are, what the ETH ETF looks like, so on and so forth. So definitely go check that one out as well. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so there. Now, I think I am coming up on the hour mark here. I just wanted to finish off today's episode with something with regards to the markets. And just very, very quick on the market side of things. The markets are weird, guys. Like, someone asked me at the event that I went to in Sydney, is like, what's your current take on the markets? And I'm like, this is the weirdest bull market that we've ever had. It is so weird, guys. But it is also kind of rhyming with the last bull market, because people will look at what's happening with the market right now and look and say, oh, well, BTC, went to new all-time highs and then sold off. I'm like, yeah, that's what happened every time that it's done that in previous cycles. Like that's still the same. So the weirdness comes from like the acceleratedness of the bull market, where essentially BTC never went to all-time highs before the halvening, and we're like 9 months ahead of the general kind of cycle. That's why I said that the 4-year cycle is dead, and that's why I said that it's a weird bull market. And someone asked me, you know, what's a 3-month window for when we're going to top in this market cycle? And I couldn't answer that. I couldn't even give you a 6-month window. I just don't know. It's very, very hard on the timing side of things. I can probably say on the asset price side of things that I think that ETH is going to top between 15 and 20K before going into another like bear kind of crab market. But I couldn't tell you a time on that. It could actually be until September 2025, which is when Eric thinks it's going to happen. Or it could happen end of this year. We just don't know. There's just too many variables at play. The 4-year cycle is dead, so we can't really go off of that. So that's my general view on things. And I know the market came down a lot. You know, ETH went from 4K to almost 3K, bounced back up to like 3,500. That's all just general kind of volatility. That's all kind of normal volatility. I guess I'm talking about the longer term macro kind of crypto cycle here, which is just impossible to tell at this point. Like I got no idea. I can't give you guys any insights here. I do still think we're like mid-ish bull market, to be fair, because of all the craziness going on. But I haven't really seen like new retail investors show up in a really big way yet. They're here and there. Obviously, meme coins have taken off a bit, and the meme coin pre-sale shit is like just brain dead and attracting a lot of newbies to it, and they're losing money. But in terms of like a real big push of retail coming in, I haven't really seen much signs of that yet. And I think they'll come in once BTC and ETH are persistently above their all-time highs, but they're not really here just yet, in my opinion. But anyway, I think on that note, I'm going to end it there for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all next week. Thanks everyone.